As we enter into our message time, Ann's going to bring to us this reading from Isaiah.
Our first lesson for this Sunday comes from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 58, beginning at verse 9. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places, and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thanks, Ann. As we look at this time period, Isaiah is writing at a time when the people are in exile. So this is after the great kingdoms of Saul, David, and Solomon, and Israel split into two kingdoms of Israel and Judah, eventually overthrown by Assyria and Babylon, and the people are now in exile. And Isaiah is talking to the people because even in the most desperate times that they have known throughout their life, they continue to hear from the prophets. This becomes so important because virtually everything else around them has gone away. The one thing they can hold on to is their religious heritage. And the one thing that holds them together in that religious heritage is to hear from the prophets. And so Isaiah comes to them. The interesting thing is Isaiah is not bringing them a new message. This is the message Isaiah was bringing to them before they went into exile. Isaiah was already telling them how it is that God wanted them to live, that God wanted them to take care of the poor and the needy around them, that God wanted them to look with favor upon those who were in desperate need, and they didn't listen. So Isaiah brings that message to them again, even in exile, because the one question they've been asking is, how do we get to go home? What will happen so that we get to go home? And Isaiah tells them, do the things that I told you to do before you were taken into exile. Look around at the people around you, because when you take care of the poor and the needy in your midst, then you are actually living into the way that God wants you to live. Jesus picks up on this as well as a part of what we'll have for our gospel reading for today. So I'm going to invite our gospel readers to come up and read this portion of Matthew where Jesus is speaking.
The reading today is from Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 20. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come to abolish, but to fulfill.
For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven.
You guys can go sit down with your families if you want, or stay right there, whichever is helpful for you. So Jesus picks up on these great words from Isaiah, as Isaiah has been coming and talking to the people about even being light right where they are. And as Isaiah talks to the people about that, you can probably imagine what people were thinking. That is, You've probably had the experience at some point of being alone and all of a sudden things getting very, very dark, and I mean like no light, darkness kind of thing, and you are fumbling around for a candle or a flashlight, and then 20 minutes into that search you remember you actually have it right there on your phone, and so you finally turn on that light and you know what that's like. But you might also know the experience of being with multiple people when the power goes out or the lights go out, and everyone now is scrambling. Does anybody have a candle? Does anybody have a flashlight? And the first person to find one is the hero. They are the one who like rules the day now because they found light in the midst of darkness. And the wonderful thing about that is the person who finds that light does not hide it, but brings it so everybody can enjoy that light. The person who brings that light forward does not do it for themselves, but does it for the whole household, for the whole territory. That's what Isaiah was getting at when he told the people that they could actually be light. And when he did that, using that metaphor of how that sounds, he was bringing that specifically in the midst of exile to still remind people that whenever people around you are in need and you do something for them. Wait, kids, are you ready? Are you ready for your line? I'm going to come to it in just a second. I didn't want you to miss it. All right, are you ready? Okay, so whenever you do something for them, for instance, whenever somebody is hungry, we need to be light. Exactly. That's our call in the midst of that. And as Isaiah went on to continue to talk to the people, I'm sure that he already anticipated what people were thinking along the way. What if I'm really generous and I share a whole bunch and I give away more than I actually thought I might, and then one day I find out that I'm hungry? And I'll be thinking back to that time when I had so much and I gave it away, and I'll be thinking, oh, if only I would have kept some of that for myself. If only I would have been more protective of what was mine, then maybe I wouldn't be hungry now. And Isaiah says that's not a concern you need to have, because when you share, what happens is, in the first place, God continues to provide for you. Isaiah uses that wonderful imagery of a spring of water, of the water of life, that as you give that away, God keeps replenishing in you so that you just have more that you're able to share. And even if there would come a time where you would find yourself in need, then all of the needs that you shared with the community in the past will now be shared with you, because that's what it means to live in community. And when we're talking about this, Isaiah's not talking about the fact that we're going to give up, our big home so everybody can have the same size house and all that. Isaiah wasn't even trying to figure that out. All Isaiah was saying is, if there are people who are hungry, we just need to be light. We're just talking about the most basic ways that we care for one another, and that was Isaiah's main concern. I think it was Jesus' main concern as he talked about being salt and light. Jesus was probably actually being a little bit funny when he says if salt loses its saltiness. You know the one property that salt has? It's salty. That's all it really does. I mean, we know it can do things. It can flavor, it can enhance, it can preserve and all that. But salt's one main function is to be salty. And so you really can't not be salty. But there are times when you can be a little too salty. I mean, we know that there are times when too much salt will harden our own arteries. And there are times when too much of putting something on somebody else and being judgmental or calling them out for who they are, that feels like the kind of salt that hardens them against God. When Jesus talked about us being salt, Jesus wanted to be the kind of salt that enhances somebody's life, the kind of salt that raises somebody, that makes them more of who they are. That's what we're talking about. And when Jesus couples that with the idea of being light and talks about, how could a beacon on a hill possibly be hid? It can't, because people are always looking for a way that somebody will bring them a little bit of more light into their life. That's our call as Christians, is to be that for people around us. As Isaiah went on to talk about that, he gave a great line at the end of that we will be the repairer of the breach. That is, if there is a gap that it's too big for anybody to be able to repair on their own, collectively as a community, that's what we choose to do. That's a part of Super Bowl of Caring. Not just this congregation, congregations throughout our community and our world are going to repair the breach. But here's what we're talking about when we talk about that breach. In the fellowship hall, as part of the tailgate party today, you're going to see all kinds of posters up talking to you about. I want to read a couple of things that you'll find on those posters when you go in there. Right now, there are as many as 811 million people, over 800 million people around the world that are undernourished. That's a breach that we want to fill that gap. Here in Colorado, nearly 700,000 people, over 11% of the population in the state of Colorado is food insecure. That is a gap that we want to fix. Just right around us here at Bethany in the Denver County, over 13% of the population is food insecure. 1 in 3 people in Colorado lack reliable access to nutritious food. So sometimes there's things around there, but just not the kind of thing that's going to allow somebody to be sustained. And 1 in 6 children do not have adequate nutrition. Isaiah would say we need to step into that gap. And the other stat that is mind-boggling when we look at this on a global stage, the world produces more food today than it has at any point in human history. Today, the world produces more food than at any point in human history, and yet 800 million still are hungry, and it takes about $2 a day globally to be able to interrupt that gap. These are the things that Isaiah would be talking about. It does not mean that our gifts have to be massive. The simplest of gifts can make the most profound impact, because when people are hungry, we need to be light. It doesn't take a lot. You think about the light of one candle, how much it can illuminate. That's what we're talking about for our own lives. That's what the Super Bowl of Caring looks to do. And what happens after all of that is we hear these words from Jesus: let your light so shine before others that they would see your good works, that might bring glory to God in heaven. That's a part of what we do, so that people will know that somehow out in the world there are people who care deeply for their basic needs, that people who care deeply for the way that they are able to function in a world, for people who care deeply about the prophecies of Isaiah and others, who said this is what it means to be a community of God. You know, my joy would be, and I doubt if I'll see it in my lifetime, just knowing how things go, but I'd love to see, maybe in 2 generations, a pastor get up to preach on Isaiah and see that phrase, the repairer of the breach, and not know what that's talking about, because people around the world have enough food. Not know what it's talking about because the people around the world have enough dignity. Not even know what that's talking about because the people around the world are cared for and loved in a way that they understand that God desires to be in a relationship with them that brings them life. That would be a goal for the church. We're not going to get there today, but man, we can make a step. We can get a little bit closer to repairing a breach, because when people are hungry, we need to be light. And I think that we have another update. Kids, you got your pom-poms ready? Are you ready to go? We got our sign holders ready? All right, let's take a look and see what our new update is. Oh, first. People of Bethany, you are amazing. We're going to keep this going throughout the day as a part of that. Let's join in singing this wonderful song, You Satisfy the Hungry Heart. You'll find it on page 5. I invite you to stand.